Welcome to the Greg Bennett Show, presented by Any Question. I'm your host, Greg Bennett, and I've just finished an absolutely fantastic episode with one of the most incredible icons in the world of triathlon, Mr. Bob Babbitt. We share his journey into the sport in the late 70s and how the sport developed and grew throughout the 80s and early 90s, and how he, with his media business and sharing the news of endurance sport, was able to help spread the word of Ironman and triathlon around the world. And really, Bob is just a fantastic storyteller. We then transition into his work that he does with the Challenge Athlete Foundation. He's the founder of that organization, which has raised $147 million to date. And please go support them in any way you can, whether that's volunteering or giving money, and the way they look after adaptive athletes around the world. He shares some incredible stories in this show about some of the athletes that they've worked with. Just absolutely remarkable human being. The way he gives to others and has done so much for the sport of triathlon and CAF, the Challenged Athlete Foundation. Just a remarkable person. I think you're going to truly enjoy this episode. I really, really did. It was a very, very special episode, and a big thank you to Bob for coming on. A little bit of housekeeping. I just want to thank you for listening to the show and sharing it, and all your feedback. I truly appreciate it. You can also find Bob on Any Question. That's anyquestion.com/Bob Babbitt. You can go on there and you can ask him any follow-up questions and listen to his answers there. He's just coming on as an expert right now, which is fantastic. He's also helping us build the adaptive channel on Any Question. But until next time, everybody, enjoy this episode, and remember, success comes to those who endure just one moment longer. All right, today I'm joined by a true triathlon legend. For over 40 years, he has influenced the world of triathlon for the better. He started racing triathlons way back in the late 1970s. He did his first Ironman Triathlon in 1980 on the island of Oahu, and ended up completing 5 more when the event moved to the Big Island. He's been inducted into both the Ironman Hall of Fame and the USA Triathlon Hall of Fame. And he's also co-founded Competitor Magazine and the Challenged Athlete Foundation. Plus, he created Competitor Radio and Babbittville Radio. And he's traveled the world interviewing the greats of the sport with his show, Breakfast with Bob. His passion for the sport and willingness to always put others first and just help them achieve greatness is just truly inspiring, and it's just an honor and privilege to have him join me today on the show. So welcome, and thank you for joining me on the Greg Bennett Show, Bob Babbitt. How are you, mate?
Hey, Greg, such a pleasure, man. Appreciate everything you do to put a spotlight on the most amazing athletes on the planet. I think for years, people know basketball, baseball, football, but they don't know who our athletes are. And I think there's a misperception that our athletes grew up like LeBron James or like Mike Trout, that they're identified at 5, 6, 7 years old, or like a Greg Bennett, identified when they're a kid and going, okay, you're going to be an Olympian, you're going to be a professional triathlete, we're going to fund everything to help you get there. It's not true. You were an age grouper. You were a kid doing the sport before you found out that, oh, I can go pretty fast and maybe I can do well at this. And then you find out I have Olympic potential. Maybe I can make a living here. But that stuff all comes later. Early on, you're like every age grouper who's here in Milwaukee, they have the same dreams that you had back then. It's like, I want to go faster today than I was yesterday.
And so well said. I got to tell everybody, we're actually in person. We're actually getting to sit in person in a hotel room here in Milwaukee after a fabulous night last night at the Hall of Fame dinner.
Yes.
Wasn't that special? I mean, you've been to all of them, I think. That was a really great
It was a great one, watching your beautiful wife, Laura, get inducted in.
It was special.
It was very special. You getting to introduce her, and you had Gwen Jorgensen and Robert Plant. And I was just telling you beforehand, Robert Plant's in my 70 to death age group.
70 to death.
When you've been around, I think my first age group was 25 to 29. So now I'm in the 70 to 74. I think I've been in like 10 age groups or something. Anyways, so we're at the Legacy Triathlon in Long Beach a few weeks ago, and you know you're old when you're next to Robert Plant, who I think is, 76, 77. He might be 80. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But he's jumping up and down before the start of a race. I'm like, what are you doing, Robert? And he goes, I'm trying to get my pacemaker going. I'm like, okay. So you know you're in the right wave when the guy's trying to get his pace maker
Oh my God.
going.
It was a really special night to see Gwen Jorgensen, the 2016 Olympic champion, then Robert Plant, who's just, been an icon of the sport, and racing, and it's just unbelievable. My wife, Laura Bennett, and
Leslie Senses McDowell.
That's right. Thank you very much.
Well, and what's great, she's won, people talk about Paula winning 8 times in Kona. She's won Age Division 11 times in Kona. And now she's like, oh, I'm doing equestrian now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people think you get to be 60 or 65 and in life you retire.
Yeah.
In our sport, you go, oh, maybe I'll try gravel racing now. I'm going to try something different. I don't run as well, so I'll do something different.
That's what came across last night. It was like from all the acceptance speeches, it was almost like we just love to play, and we love to play with great people, and we're inspired to be around others. And, and for me, on this show, I often talk about the reason why we do the sport is the people.
Totally.
Right?
It's always
I mean,
the people.
Swimming, biking, and running, if you did that on your own forever, it's nice, and it's a nice life. But when you're around the people and you're outside and you're around people that are all trying to just get that little bit more out of life, it's just so special.
Well, I always talk about our sport as it's an equal opportunity abuser. It doesn't really care if you're Greg Bennett, one of the top guys in the world, or if you're slow old Bob Babbitt, who's his new motto is 10-minute miles, a new 8-minute mile. You sort of adapt as you go. It's the ultimate sport, because if you're the orthopedic reality, if you're a runner, when you're 50 or 55, you're not running faster than you did when you're 45. As a triathlete, I'm 71. I know I haven't had my best race yet. I know I can get a faster wetsuit. I can buy faster wheels, right? I can get graphite shoes. I can be faster at 80 than I was at 70. Where as a runner, you don't have that possibility. But this sport, because of cross-training, nutrition, wheels, all that stuff, you can actually get better as you get older, which is why it's the ultimate lifetime fitness sport, and why you have Robert Plant trying to get his heart rate going last night with his pacemaker, and your beautiful wife, and then Gwen is there. It is a sport that touches so many different people.
All the age groupers. We had one young girl came up on stage, and she'd just done her first couple of triathlons, and I think she was 16 years of age, and she got up and she spoke beautifully, and just was. You could almost see the joy of her, and going back to what we were saying, just be around that community of people. And her coach, I can't remember his name, but he says, look, I don't just put my athletes in the junior and the kids races. I put them in the open races so they can get a feel for the energy of the sport, and all the various age groups from Robert Plant all the way down. It's such a community.
One of the things that I've been a big proponent of is our sport has aged, right? There's a lot of folks who are, if you look at your biggest age groups, usually it's like 45 and up are your biggest age groups. And there's a problem with that, because we need new blood. Yeah. And when we've worked really hard in Southern California, we would do these pool triathlons, because I think the thing that scares people the most is a swim. Yeah. If you and I go for a run and we get tired, we stop. Yeah. If we go for a bike ride and we get tired, we stop. We go for a swim, we get tired, we die. That's a problem. That's a deterrent. That is a deterrent,
That's a little deterrent.
And you're in the water and you're swimming in a race, and you've got glare, you've got current, you got kelp. How cold is the water? Someone playing bongos on your head. All the crap that can happen is in the swim. So when you do races, and we have a series of them with a 5K run, anybody can do it. You can walk it. 10-mile bike, and you could take a bike out of the garage that hasn't seen a light of day since Reagan was president, and you can ride that. And then 150-yard swim in a pool. You jump at one end of the pool, you serpentine, you get to the other end of the pool, you're a triathlete. Yeah. McKeely Jones, who obviously you know really well.
One of the greatest of all time.
One of the greatest of all time. But what makes her great is she loves racing. Yeah. So she was my partner. We'd go to the Tinsel Triathlon in Hemet, California, or the Pasadena Triathlon around the Rose Bowl. And so we're out at Tinsel Triathlon. This is when I realized how important these little races are. We're out there one year, and it's December, and it's a 3-mile run, 10-mile bike, 150-yard swim in a pool in beautiful Hemet, California. And there's a guy there with his board shorts on, his belly hanging out, his bike with high bars and a koozie on it, right? And he's going to do his first ever triathlon. And this nice young girl, McKeely, who has no idea is an Olympic champion, Olympic silver medalist, Ironman world champion, is setting up his transition for him. Oh, that nice young girl helped me out. So the race finishes. This guy has finished the race. And the announcer is like, hey, everybody, you did a great job today. Congratulations on finishing. there's going to be a television show today on the Ironman Triathlon World Championship that happened in October. This is December. The show's going to air this morning or this afternoon. You should go home and watch it. And this guy with his belly hanging out and the cool bike with the high bars goes, his wife says, honey, what's the Ironman? And he goes, same thing I just did a little longer. Right? At that point, the light bulb went on for me. If you walked up, if Greg Bennett walked up, if Mark Allen walked up, he'd be like, we are simpatico. We are brothers. We are both triathletes. It doesn't matter how long it is. Yeah. You want to be in this sport because it's sexy and cool and fun. Yeah. And this guy now was the same as McKeely. Yeah. I did the same. He had no idea. Olympics, no. But he now is a triathlete. Yeah. And that we need more of that. We need to get more people into the sport. When we have a race in San Diego actually McKeely's involved with this, called the Triton Man for University of California, San Diego. And they do a draft legal race, but then they do an age group race. And it's the only race I do where 90% of the people are 29 and under.
Wow.
Right? Yeah.
Wow.
I'll have 3 people pass me, and their ages don't add up to mine. I'm looking at their calves, and they're like 18, 24, 23. I'm like, that's 56. I still got 15 years on them.
Hey, I got to interrupt. I'm really curious because I've been wanting to jump in here and intersect. How many races do you think you've done? I mean, have you counted them?
I have not. Yeah, at one point, I never really have. Because, I know that San Diego International, they've held it 40 times, and I've done 38 of them. So there's a lot of races like that. So I bet you it's I don't know, 700, 800 or something like that. I don't train a lot, but I love racing.
But you've always loved racing, and you've always loved to be around. And when you're not racing, you're still at the big race. You're not racing this weekend, are you?
I am racing Sunday.
You're racing Sunday. Of course you
Sprint
are.
Race.
So we're at the age group national championships in Milwaukee, Wisconsin right now. And
I got my peeps in the 70 to death category, so we're all out here.
Oh, mate, you're such an inspiration. What I want to do is just shift gear a little bit.
Sure.
It's one of my favorite parts to do in this show, and that is to rewind the clock.
Okay.
And I know that we're going to be rewinding a while with you, but
okay, the clock goes back a long way. Hopefully, it still runs.
But I need to rewind the clock and pick your brains both on your journey personally.
Okay.
Plus, I don't believe there's anybody better in the world for me to sit with and do the journey of triathlon.
Oh my God!
Right?
Okay, yeah.
And doesn't mean we have to do everything, but it's kind of, it'd be crazy for me to not just dive in. But first, let's do you.
Okay.
Let's. How did you find triathlon? And tell me about that, sort of finding the passion for the sport.
Sure. I living in Chicago back in 77, 78. I moved to San Diego, and the sport had started in San Diego in 1974 at a place called Fiesta Island. And I joined the San Diego Track Club with a guy named Ned Overend, who went on to be world mountain bike champion.
Yes, I remember Ned Overend.
Ned and I met each other rock climbing down in Baja. And the two of us, actually, we started a little rock climbing business called Adventure Incorporated, and I was scared of heights, but Ned was good at that stuff. Anyways, so Ned and I, we read an article in 1979 about this thing called the Ironman in Sports Illustrated, which was the Bible of all sports. Yeah. And we were living down by the beach in San Diego. And we're like, wow, how do you do this thing? And it's not like you can go online and find out how do you.
No.
But the guy who won the race was a guy named Tom Warren, who owned a bar in San Diego called Tug's Tavern. And Tommy had put on one of the first ever endurance events called the Tug Swim Run Swim. Yeah. It's a half-mile swim, 5-mile run, and then you swam around the pier again. So all of us skinny runner guys knew that if we didn't get a pretty good gap on the swimmers, by the time we were halfway back to the Crystal Pier, they're going to swim over our ass. They're just going to go right over, which they did. But the cool part about that event, you came across the finish line. They handed you a popsicle stick, right, with your number on it, an early timing system. Yeah. But the race didn't finish there. You ran 3 blocks to Tug's, and the first 75 people got breakfast, right? So the idea was to get in, get your plate with the runny eggs on it, and your Tug's glass when the 76th person showed up and got nothing, right?
Wow.
That was that was the thing. So what happened is a guy named Mike Plant, who was doing photo business back then, he would take those little photos you would get in the mail. He took a photo of Ned and I. And Ned and I tried to get this photo from the guy. That was all we wanted to do. And he lived in La Jolla, and I tracked him down. And, he was telling me he had started a newspaper called San Diego Track Club News, and he was covering these different events. Anyways, then we wanted to track Tommy down to find out about the Ironman. How do you do this? How do you get into it? So we called Tommy, and he's like, oh, Babbitt, yeah, come on down to my office. It's just, I'm on the west side of the street, just south of Crystal Pier in Pacific Beach. So Ned and I go there. There's no buildings there. There's a motorhome. And there's a motorhome with a bike on the back, with paddle boards on top, with running shoes tied around the side view mirror. And I put my head in, and I hear, "Is it Babbitt? Welcome to my office." He had a roll of dimes, and he had a phone behind him, like a pay phone. Yeah. And he'd go to a pay phone and call and order tortilla chips and things like that for his bar. Then he'd run 5 miles every day. There was like a white telephone pole at a place called the Jetty. It's like 2.5 miles, and you turn around and come back. To this day, there's a black line around that pole from his greasy hand, taking the turn every day for 50 years.
Wow.
Then he'd paddle out in the ocean. Then he'd ride up the ocean side. And that's just what he did. So we're like, Mr. Warren, sir, how do we get into this Ironman? He says, well, let's go to the bar. It's 9:30 in the morning. So we go to this bar right behind him called TD Hayes. And again, this guy's going to be our mentor, the guy who's going to teach us how to do this stuff. So as he's talking, he's like he's got a magic marker, and he's making a mark on his arm. We're like, so how do you register? And he's telling us different stuff. And we're like, Mr. Warren, sir, since sir, our mentor, what's the deal with the magic marker? And he goes, I have a little bit of a drinking problem, so I make a mark on my arm, and when I get to my sleeve, I go home every time I have a beer.
You kidding?
I'm like, okay. Then he takes us to his house.
But he was a hell of an athlete, too.
Oh, he won the freaking Ironman.
Yeah.
And then we go to his house, and it's like 4,000 square feet with one bedroom and a sauna with a bike mounted in the sauna. Like now that's Lionel Sanders' workout. Then you get put away. So he would do like 3-4 hours in the sauna on his bike. Getting ready. So then he says, well, first off, guys, you got to get bikes. So Ned and I go to a police auction, and I got a bike for $75. The whole back end had been in a fire. It was, charred. I had foam grips on it for handlebars. I put a Radio Shack radio on there and bungee corded on so I could listen to music. And since we were rock climbers, we had these helmets that had no holes in it. So we go for these 20-mile bike rides and feel like our heads were going to explode. And we're like, this 112-mile bike ride, it's going to take us 10 hours. There's no way we're going to do this in one day. So I went out and got panniers, sleeping bag, and tent because I thought you swam 2.4, rode 56, camped out, rode back the next day, and did the marathon. I thought it was a 2-day thing. No idea. Seriously, no idea. So we go over, and I've got we had no idea about bike shoes. We just had just PF flyer type of things, and you put them in the cage. I didn't know you were supposed to tighten the cage. I thought you just put your foot in there. Yeah. So we go over to Ned and I, we find out, we send our $25 in, and we sign up for this Ironman. I'm number 3 because I sent my $25 in third. I wasn't seated. But when we came off the plane, and back then, so the event, Ironman had 15 starters in 78, 12 finishers. 15 in 79, 12 finishers. After the article in Sports Illustrated, now we had 108 of us coming over to Oahu, right?
Yeah.
108 of us. Yeah. So
that was 79. That was 80.
80.
That's right.
So third year.
Your third year.
Yep. So come over, and Ned and I are all set to do this thing. And you have to have your own crew. They don't block off any roads. So one of the kids, I was a school teacher at the time. So one of the kids I taught, her dad lived over there. And he came over with his 2 girlfriends in his Fiat convertible. And who knew what to eat? So I had like 50 loaves of Hawaiian sweetbread, Gatorade. We had this nutrition. Everybody was guessing. Nobody had a clue. Dave Scott's parents followed him with a spare bike on the top roof of the car.
I've seen those pictures of that.
He had his shoe wouldn't go into the bike.
That was Dave's first year too, right?
Yes. Dave and I were together. So together, they had to duct tape Dave's foot into the pedal because his cleat wouldn't stay. So remember they had those funny cleats back then? So there was a movie called Breaking Away that had come out in 1979, huge, right? And they duct taped his foot on. Dave stole it. They duct taped his foot when it wouldn't stay. And so Dave Scott's parents were like, oh, well, we'll just duct tape his 112 miles without getting off the bike. So anyway, we are all set to do this race, and there's these big storms in Oahu. And the race director calls us all in, this guy Hank. He calls us into, and we're at the Grand Otani Hotel. And Ned and I did all of our swimming in a 120 length to the mile condo pool in San Diego. We had been in the ocean, and we had done the tugs thing, but we're looking at 10-foot waves breaking against the building, right?
Wow.
We're going to die. But Ned and I were like, it's nice knowing you. Tomorrow we're going to die. This will be our last day on Earth. It was really good hanging out with you.
How old were you?
I think I was 28.
28, so really young. Yeah.
So we go into the meeting, and this guy, Hank, goes, guys, I've got an opportunity. ABC Wide World of Sports is here to cover cliff diving on Sunday. They want to cover our race tomorrow, which will be huge for our event. Remember, they got 108 people. That's it. It'll be huge for our event. But the year before, they had to postpone it a day because the surf was so big. They had to move it Sunday. If I move it to Sunday, I'll lose ABC. So I'm moving the swim to Ala Moana Channel, which Ned and I were like, we are going to live. This is the greatest day of our lives. Yeah. But meanwhile, Dave Scott and all the Navy SEALs who were in the room, what a pussy event. You can't move the swim from the Waikiki rough water swim. It's not the Ironman. Ned and they're like, yeah, you can't move the swim like, knowing we're going to live. This is the best thing that ever happened. Yeah, baby, I can't believe we're going to live. So they did. They moved the swim. Yeah. And so you swam 4 lengths in Ala Moana Channel. So I'm swimming, and I'm still staying as shallow as possible. And I'm swimming, and there was a guy in the race. His name was John Huckabee, 59 years old, from the East Coast. He was the only guy with sponsors. He was sponsored by like Acme Meats or something. And he had done the Athens Marathon 3 times in a row in one day.
Oh, wow.
It was, like out, back. But he had no idea how to swim, right? So the incredible Huck, as I swim down, and on my way back, I almost go into Huck, who's walking the swim. I swear to God, he's the shallow water. He's moving his hands like he's swimming. He walked the entire 2.4 mile swim. He's the only guy in the history of the Ironman to get blisters on his feet during the swim portion of the Ironman Triathlon World Championship. So I come out of the water, and there's my crew. And I've got my wool jersey on, long sleeve wool jersey, because I'm an idiot. I've got shorts, like beige shorts with a regular belt, a leather belt. I'm the only guy to wear a leather belt at the Ironman World Championship. And I've got a pocket sewn on the back of this thing so that I could put my Hawaiian sweetbread in there and eat this thing. And I have my radio so I can tune in songs. I get on the bike, and I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. I've got, stuff in my pocket, and I'm tuning in my radio.
And food.
I know. I'm riding through, and no roads are blocked. I'm riding through Waikiki. Oh, and I had solid rubber tires on because I had no idea how to change a flap. So I had to wax these things on. And so, anyways, and reflectors, had all the cool stuff. Get to about mile 25, there's my crew on the side of the road. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be like Tour de France. There's going to be a food handoff. This is great. Big Mac fries and a Coke. Brown bag, Big Mac fries and a Coke. Mile 90, I got a root beer snow cone. And then I come in at the end of the bike, and I can hear this music. And I come in, and my crew is there. They got a bamboo mat set up. They've got a boombox playing tunes. How about a massage? And I'm like, oh, my neck is so tight. I got a 45-minute massage between the bike and the run. It was like the greatest thing ever. Then they had a rule back then that if you lost 5% of your body weight, they would pull you out of the race. Where the science came from, I have no idea. But they had scales. We had to get off our bike a number of times. And John Howard raced that year. And John was
Uber biker.
3-time Olympian, Pan American Games gold medalist. He was the overwhelming favorite. He was supposed to win. He couldn't swim. Swim took him an hour 51, right? He was out there a long time. But John was, imagine he went like 4 hours something in that bike ride with stoplights and with having to get off the bike and get weighed. Wow. So that bike course, his course record that he set back then was pretty amazing. So anyways, I leave transition on the run, and they weigh me. And then I'm eating Hawaiian sweetbread, and I'm waddling through Waikiki and drinking Gatorade. I get to mile 5, and I can hear the guy in the walk. I get on the scale. I can hear the guy, can you give me that again? He's gained 5 pounds. You can't gain weight doing this thing. So then I'm running along, and then we get to Diamond Head. And you run up Diamond Head, then you drop down into Kapolani Park, and you're done with the race. And I thought this thing was going to take me 2 days. My crew is behind me with their Fiat convertible lighting up the road, and I'm running up Diamond Head, and I'm like, this is the coolest thing I have ever done. I'm going to finish this thing in one day. I had no idea to finish one day. And then I'm running down into Kapolani Park, and I start thinking, God, there's going to be bands. There's going to be, all sorts of cheerleaders. I can't wait to see the festivities to the finish. And as I come into the park, I see a chalk line and a light bulb. And I hear a guy out there. He's like, hey, you. I'm like, yeah? You in the race? Yeah. You're done. That was it. There was one guy doing one-arm push-ups in the park and me and a light bulb and a chalk line. There was nothing there. But it was like one of those things, and you've had that moment where you know you've done something that changed you. Yeah. You're a different person right now than you were 5 minutes ago. Yeah. I just knew this thing meant so much to me, it's going to mean way more to other people down the line. There's something special here. This is magic in a bottle. And so when I came home from that, I was still working as a teacher, but Mike Plant offered me a job working for San Diego, what was Running News, and I sort of convinced him, hey, this triathlon thing's going to get big. So it became San Diego Running and Triathlon News. I became his editor, and I would drive my partner Lois, who became the best photographer in the sport, did the Iron War shot and everything else. Lois left. She was the art teacher at the same school I was at, and we left together, and she became the photographer for LA for Running and Triathlon News. I was the editor. We drive to LA every weekend and cover running races, triathlon races, and just we were in Fat City. We were loving every second of it.
It's because of people like you that we have the sport, though. When you go back and you think about, firstly, that you just adopted and loved it right away, right? That passion, that hook. But then you spread the news. Right. Then you've shared the message to the world. And yes, you have the Sports Illustrated. Yes, you had the ABC effect.
Right.
But those are one-offs, and they can be forgotten pretty quick.
Right.
But when you have the consistency that you guys then gave the sport, so then I'm a kid in Australia, 13, 14, 15, and now I'm starting to see this trickle-down effect, right?
Of course, you're seeing Greg Welch and McKeely Jones.
Yeah, well, even before that, 85, 86 is kind of when I was starting.
Mark Allen, Dave Scott, all that stuff.
And those
Tinley.
guys, and we used to, in the pubs in Australia, you got to be over 18 to go in, but we'd sneak in the back and
watch a TV show.
And they'd have it on Sky, on the Sky TV, and they'd have the, later on the Bud Light series, the USTS Bud Light series, and Dave Scott, and everything else. And everyone forgets that Dave Scott, yes, he was a remarkable Ironman athlete, and this.
He won everything.
He won that USTS series and actually was one of the better short course athletes there for a while as well. So,
he won the first ever USTS race in 1982, in June of 82.
Yeah.
And that is what people don't understand. So 1980 was ABC. The year before was Sports Illustrated.
That's right. Yeah.
So then ABC is covering the event. And it's great. Dave Scott wins in 80. He takes Tom Warren's course record was 11:15. He went 9:23. He changed everything.
Oh, yeah.
But it's hard for an average person at home watching this thing when Dave Scott needs to cool down after doing a 140.6 mile race. The following year, John Howard wins, who is a 3-time Olympian, Pan American. People who are watching in Pittsburgh, they can't relate to this guy.
Yeah.
And then in February of 82, you had Julie Moss.
Yeah, that was when we moved over to the Big Island, right?
We moved over in 81.
Oh, 81. 81. That's right.
That's right. So John Howard, who in 1980 finished, I think, third or fourth, and he was supposed to win. Nobody knew who the hell Dave Scott was. He was a swim instructor. But John Howard was this amazing cyclist. Well, it proved when he got his butt kicked that you can't just be a great cyclist. You got to be a triathlete. Yeah. So he went to San Diego, became a swimmer, he took like 35, 40 minutes off his swim time, ran a 3-hour something marathon and won in 1981 as a triathlete. Now that he's a triathlete, he won the race. So people couldn't relate to him. They couldn't relate to Dave. Then all of a sudden, Julie Moss is on television coming apart at the seams,
she was
winning
like
the race.
22 or something. She was
22
really young,
years old.
right?
Both her and Kathleen.
That's right.
Her and Kathleen were 22 years old, and actually it was funny. On the exact anniversary, on February 6, 1982, and then on 2022, February 6,
40 years.
I did an interview with Julie and Kathleen together for Tri Club of San Diego. We had a full house in San Diego, and Julie looks up at the clock and she goes, "This is when it happened." It was like 6:05. It was like just, and so she had this huge lead. And she's wearing a trucker hat. She's 22 years old. She could be your daughter.
Yeah.
She could be your girlfriend.
Yeah.
She could be, the person who babysits your kids. So people sitting home in Pittsburgh, now they have something to relate to.
Yeah.
I can relate to this girl. I call it the original reality television because we were watching at home as this woman came apart at the seams. You watch her collapse. You watch her poo herself. You watch her get up, and you're thinking, you're like a boxer. Stay down or walk. Quit trying to run. If you walk, you'll get there. And then she collapses for the last time. And Kathleen, who has no idea, when she came on to Elite Drive, she goes, I was expecting all this pageantry, people screaming. I was in second place. And, it was like a funeral because they'd been watching Julie.
Yeah.
So then when Kathleen, all of a sudden the lights and the ABC truck and everything's on her, and she's like, what happened? You've won. She starts jumping up and down. Well, then the camera goes back and you see Julie crawling, right? And you see her collapse on the line. They put a lei around her neck. She's got a smile on her face. They pick her up on a stretcher. The smile on
her face was
amazing.
Yeah.
And they take her off on a stretcher.
Yeah.
And what people don't realize is ABC Wide World of Sports in those days, they would do 3 vignettes. So it was an hour show. They did Ironman. Well, then they go to ice dancing while Julie's on a stretcher. People have no idea if she's alive or dead. People lit up the phone lines at ABC, and ABC was forced to fly Kathleen and Julie to New York the following weekend to be on air with Jim McKay, who is the dean of ABC Wide World of Sports, to assure the American public this sport doesn't kill people.
But this is before women were even allowed to do the marathon in the Olympics. So 84 was the first year they had the marathon. So here we have, they're doing the marathon after 112-mile bike and the swim. This was it forced almost the Olympic hand. We better get our shit together with the women as well.
And the commentator for ABC that day was Jim Lampley.
Yeah.
And because he was the commentator on the Ironman with Julie and Kathleen, he was the guy at the finish line of the 84 Olympic Marathon to be with Joan Benoit, because he was the dean of women endurance sports now because he had called Julie and Kathleen.
Is that right? Yeah.
And then what happened from there, that was the most pivotal moment in our sport, because then Jim Curl and Carl Thomas started the United States Triathlon Series in June of 82. Yeah. And who were the stars? Julie and Kathleen, the rematch. And Kathleen got her again, right? And then the top 4 that day, Dave Scott, Scott Molina, Scott Tinley, Mark Allen. Yeah. But that led to Ironman also said, well, all these people want to do this Ironman right now. So they added a second Ironman in 82, in October of 82, so that people from other parts of the world, because when it was in February,
coming out of the middle of winter in Northern Hemisphere.
You can't do it.
Yeah. So it worked for Australians.
It worked for you guys, absolutely. It totally worked for you guys and worked for California, but it didn't work for Germany, etc. So, in fact, we should have kept it that way. We never would have seen these guys, right? America would still be dominating. We too would be dominating.
We could have shared at California and Australia.
Forget Van Lierde and Frodeno and all those guys. They'd be gone. Sebastian, we should have kept it in February. What were we thinking? So that led to a second event in February of 82, in October of 82, and that changed everything. Yeah. Now the event opened up to people from all over the world, and if you look at, after Welchie became the first non-American to win the thing in 94, and then since then Mark and then the DeBoom, and in 2001, 2002, those are the only Americans since.
The Americans have got to make this comeback at some point here. The American men, the women are doing very, very well, especially in the I2 and the World Series, and the men are coming. But it's like I feel like we've been saying that for a while now.
We've been saying that for a while. But it's that was really important. The other thing that people don't realize is that that year in 82, ABC Wide World of Sports had the rights to film the Ironman. There was another group called Freewheeling Films that Rodney Jacobs, he was a producer, and he wanted to come film the Ironman. So he called Valerie Silk, who was a race director, and said, Valerie, I'd like to come film the Ironman. She goes, I have an exclusive with ABC. He goes, we're good friends with ABC. They'll be fine. So he brought this guy over, Bruce Stern, and filming, and ABC was pissed. They didn't want them there. So there's a trailer right next to the finish line. And while Julie is crawling, the producer is screaming at Valerie, going, Valerie, we will never be back. You violated our contract. You were not supposed to let anybody else on the course. Meanwhile, this guy's assistant goes, boss, you should come see what's going on here. This is pretty amazing. He never saw it. Valerie never saw it. Oh. So when Valerie left that trailer, he thought ABC was gone. And she gets a note that Julie wanted to talk to her in medical, and Julie was apologizing for collapsing, and says, "Is it okay if I race next year?" And Valerie's like, "Sure," knowing there wouldn't be a next year. The Ironman was done. ABC
thought it was over.
Yeah, she thought Ironman was done. Then, because of the footage, and the footage got sent back to New York right away, they realized normally this would take months to edit this. It was like a couple weeks later they put this thing on because they knew they had something really special.
It was really impactful. Mark Allen, when I had him on the show, he's like, I was watching that race.
And he knew Julie.
And that was, I triggered that moment, right? Oh, he knew Julie previous to that.
He did, from lifeguarding.
Oh,
the two were lifeguarding. Yeah, he knew Julie from lifeguarding.
Yeah.
And that was what pivoted. And if you talk to people, it's Julie, it's Dick and Rick Hoyt, right? For some people, it's Jim McLaren. But there's a lot of, and usually it's not the guy who won the race overall. that got them into the sport. It made them realize that. So I think when it happened with Julie and Kathleen, they realized that this is, even though Julie is a elite athlete, this is still this is emotion. This is passion. Yeah. This is something everybody out there. And here's the thing: when she's crawling, imagine you're a typical guy in Cleveland or wherever. You've got your family, you've got your job, your life is going pretty well, and you're going, what is it about that finish line that means so much that someone will crawl to get there with a smile on their face, and how do I get some of that in my life? And that led to everybody going, okay, I've got my family, everything is going well, I need something else. I need a little bit of this pizzazz, this passion. There is something really cool here.
You just want to feel like, I mean, that's when you look at the people of triathlon and the community, if there's one way of summing them up, it's like everybody in this community is just trying to get a little bit more out of life.
Absolutely.
Right? They're all trying to peep over the edge and see what's there.
Exactly.
You know? And it's almost like that's who's attracted to this kind of a sport. And that's why you have this camaraderie and there's this really cohesive community, is because it's just... people just trying to get more out of life.
Absolutely.
It really, and Ironman, and in those days, lifted the bar and brought with it, like the rising tide lifts all boats. Right. It does. For all the sport around the world, you know, which then eventually led to the Olympic movement and everything else.
All that.
So, okay, I love all of these stories, Bob, so this is fantastic. But, you know, you've been in the sport for 40 plus years now. Are there any, apart from the moments where we've just spoken about, which must be the greatest highs, the biggest experiences that you've seen in the 40 years, if you self-reflect?
Sure. Well, obviously being in Sydney at that first Olympic Games.
Olympics,
just sitting right there at the finish line, and having spent so much time with McKeely and actually staying at her house in outside of Sydney there, and watching her get the silver. And we always looked at it that she didn't lose the gold, she won the silver, right? Whatever happened with Bridget later, that was McKeely couldn't control that. That was a very, very special moment. The other thing that throughout...
By the way, let me interrupt that so listeners know. So Bridget McMahon, she did get caught for drugs several years later. But yes, anyway, I just wanted to make sure people know.
Absolutely. So the other cool thing was throughout the 80s, we were so lucky because we had this recurring drama of Dave Scott and Mark Allen in Kona. And there was 3 television stations in the U.S. back then. And so you had in, 82, Mark's derailleur falls off the bike right when he catches Dave, right? 83, he gets third. 84, he's got a 13-minute lead, blows to the moon by half marathon. David's caught him. 85, they both boycott because there's no money. Right, Tinley wins that year, and then that following year, $100,000 mysteriously shows up, and a guy donates that and change the sport, because otherwise, those guys can make money other places. This isn't a hobby. So Ironman had to change for the better. So then 87, Mark has a 5-minute lead and ends up with internal bleeding, ends up in the hospital. And we were working on a book.
Is that when he had the bleeding nose and everything?
Yes.
There was blood going everywhere? I remember that.
I remember Dave running around the van.
Yes.
Running around the ABC
Wasn't
van.
that the ultimate overtake?
Totally. He won't notice me.
Was that up, not
no,
the
Queen
other
Highway.
side? Queen Highway, but up one of the hills there.
Yeah. And Mark what had happened is we actually had a book contract for 87, Mark and I, to do a book, Mark Allen's Total Triathlon. He also had a deal with Kellogg's. I think it was a $100,000 bonus if he won Ironman. And so Kellogg's had come out with a new cereal called Prograin, and the Prograin was actually a recycled Star Wars cereal of some sort. But they had signed, and it's Iron, they must have done a deal with Ironman, because Ironman food, right? Well, if you're Dave Scott, who's won the Ironman, 5 times, and this guy's just signed an Ironman food deal, you're not very happy about that. And you know Dave well enough to know that if there's a reason to train harder, I'll take that reason.
He's got enough of a chip on his shoulder.
He's got a chip on. The chip is there. So anyways, Mark gets that 5-minute lead, ends up internal bleeding, ends up in the hospital. Dave wins his 6th and final Ironman, and Mark's in the hospital reading these comments from Dave, basically saying Mark needs to do his own race. Mark needs to quit sitting on me during the swim, and yada yada yada. And Mark's like, I'm dying here. I might lose intestines. So at that point, we thought Mark was done, that he wasn't coming back to Kona. And then in 88, he comes back. Dave drops out the night before. He flats a couple times. So now it comes down to 89. And I called both these guys in March of 89. Guys, I want to do a photo shoot because it's going to be a great race this year. And I want, you guys side by side. Showdown on the Kona coast was my vision. It's March. All right. Dave's like, no problem. Have Mark come here to Davis. I'll do the shoot. And Mark's like, no problem. Have Dave come here to Boulder. I'll do the shoot. They aren't going anywhere. Yeah. So I had this photographer, Dave Epperson, take a backdrop and go and drive to Davis and drive to Boulder and compose the two of them on the cover. 88. It's October 88 cover, Showdown on the Kona Coast. And then the next one was Iron War with Mark in yellow and Dave in green. It was the ultimate, right? Yeah. Dave Scott on that day, when his course record was 8:28, he went 8:10. He took 18 minutes off his course record and lost by less than a minute. Yeah. It was for Mark to beat Dave.
56 seconds, wasn't it? Yeah.
For Mark to beat Dave and to beat him on the best day he ever had. And I always say, Mark, it would have been great if you'd won in 88, but it wouldn't have meant as much. Yeah. You needed to beat the man on the best day he ever had.
Yeah.
Then you were the Ironman. But the interesting part is Mark's mom realized before the 89 race, and I don't know if you know about this, there's a legend on the island that you don't ever take lava off the island, on the big island. Madame Pele is not very happy, right?
Yeah.
So Mark's mom looked up at her bookcase one day and realized that she had lava up there, right? And brought it back before the 89 race, and Mark never lost after that. But what's fascinating is I wrote about this in the 25th anniversary Ironman book, and I called the museum, the Volcano Museum, and said, now do you get letters? And oh yeah, we've got a whole case with letters and lava. Dear Madame Pele, I brought this lava home from the corner of Hualalai in Kuakini. My brother was diagnosed with cancer after that. Please take this lava back. I'm so sorry. I mean, case after case after case. And I'm like, so what do you do with the lava? Well, and then they send bottles of gin, because that's Madame Pele's favorite drink. Gin. She likes gin.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, she likes gin. So they go, we kick the rocks out the door and we take the gin home.
Thank you very much.
But I hose off before I leave that island, man. If there's a pebble stuck somewhere, I don't want to know about it, man.
Awesome. A quick mini break to remind you to go check out Any Question on iOS or Android. That's Any Question, one word. You can download it there. Or you can check out anyquestion.com/Bob Babbitt. By the way, the book, Total Triathlete, Mark Allen, I didn't realize that you the author of it.
Oh, yeah.
I could memorize that entire book. The piece on the back cover, so this was 87, 88, whenever
87.
I had that book. There was a Dave Scott book as well, but that was too technical for me.
See, this book was
Mark Allen was all stories. And
sausage
and him signing the deal with his first sponsor.
Nike was one of his first.
No, even J. David.
Yes.
J. David, I think, was his first kind of big deal. And I remember that. And then the back cover was, there's a great quote that Mark put together basically about going beyond wherever he's ever been before.
Yes,
and
opening you open doors and you open a door and you face that next challenge. Whatever's next, you don't know what's next.
It was a great quote. It was a fantastic book, and I just want to mention that because
it's funny because
it fueled my passion and desire.
Everything else had been very technical and very training oriented, and I did put a little section in there training. But I just loved. Mark actually was sitting on a beach in Maui after the '87 nightmare. And he had all these micro cassettes that I still have in a safe deposit box, by the way.
Yeah.
There's still so many gems on there from those little tapes.
That book, cool. I can't believe that gives me goosebumps, because that book influenced my life a lot in terms of. That book was so much fun to write. Yeah.
It was supposed to be with Scott Molina. Yeah. And Molina was like, I don't really feel like doing it. And so we did it with Grip.
No, with Mark, because I remember I wasn't a book reader as a kid, right? I was in high school and I was in love with triathlon. And I remember reading that book back. Can you still buy it? Total Triathlete?
Yes, you can. It's still online. It is. It's, you know what? It's really, because it was really cool. There was, one chapter was the sausage principle. Yes. And Mark was just always so insightful. When I first, spent time with Mark, I had a hard time talking in front of him, because you always felt that he was like up here mentally. He was so intense. Far ahead. So intense. And especially because my partner Lois would shoot him during the race. And we're talking hundreds and hundreds of shots of him on a bike and run. Yeah. And after a race, he'd be like, a couple days later, was Lois out there yesterday? Yeah. I said, Mark, she was 5 feet from you for 7 hours. He goes, I didn't notice.
I sat next to him last night at the dinner, and I'll be surprised if he remembers that he sat next to me.
It's unbelievable how when he's focused, it's unbelievable. Just unbelievable. He's a very special guy.
It's funny for me personally, and I know we're going a little bit off track here, but it's, for me, Mark was always a bit, I didn't have heroes, but I did kind of idolize this guy. I was like, and I remember as a kid, I didn't have any sort of equipment or gear, and I had no handlebar tape. I used electrical tape or whatever to keep the bike together. And there was one day I was going to write a letter to Mark Allen to say, look, if you have any extra gear, like help me out. And I never did, obviously. And this is way before internet or anything else. But now I kind of consider him a good friend. Right. And to be able to sit, say, come and sit with me at the induction dinner. It was actually it's just kind of like how things become that way.
You know what the funny part is too is the two of them. Yeah. I've seen them like in '86 when Mark had just done Nice. Both of them knew Dave was going to win, right? So there was no tension. They're standing at Digby Beach, which is, where the swim starts, and they're chatting the day before because Mark just decided he was in Maui and he was feeling good, and he had done Nice a week or 2 weeks beforehand. He's like, I'll just jump in. And he got second, right? Well, the following year with the Pro Grain, the Kellogg's, and the whole bit, they are sitting as close as we are right now at the pro meeting. No eye contact. Nothing, right? And it's like
I love that.
You could, the best. The tension.
I love that tension.
You could cut that with a knife. And then, even after that, so we do these interviews and we did these really fun interviews, the two of them together. We go through their careers, and obviously early career, it's Dave kicking Mark's ass. Dave kicking Mark's ass. We'd get to 89, and David like, can I leave now? Yeah. It's like, dude, give him one. Right? Sit here and and it's not like you had a bad race. No. You took 18 minutes off the course record, and he had a better day. Yeah. Tip your hat. Yeah. But it's like, for Mark has been able to come to grips with the fact Dave dominated. I needed to come to his turf and figure out how to beat him. Yeah. And he's okay with that. Yeah. And for Dave, it's still, Bob, nobody wants to talk about 89. No. I'm like,
in
all
fairness,
my people do.
When I've had Dave back on the show, I do try and sit a little longer on 87.
Of course.
Because that was a remarkable comeback when he had to run him down. Well, how many minutes did you say it was?
5 minutes. He had a 5 minute gap.
5 minutes, and then he had to run him down. And look, Mark had his issues, but still, Dave paced that to perfection in 87. And sometimes I do feel, don't get me wrong, 89, as a Hollywood movie script, you couldn't have scripted the whole thing any better than it was. That whole thing, it really was
the whole decade.
Marvelous. Yeah,
the whole decade. It was like I Love Lucy. Yeah. You had reruns every people who didn't know anything about triathlon knew Dave and Mark, the guy who runs like a duck, and the other guy, who wins every race around the world, and the guy who is a beautiful runner and wins everywhere except here.
Yeah, yeah. Right? No, I just think it's fantastic. I want to shift gear a little bit because I want to talk about the Challenged Athlete Foundation.
Good.
Because this is, and I want to make sure that we give people a bit of a call to action here as well, how to help out. But first and foremost, just tell me about how that started. Sure. And then we'll go into what it's about and highlight some stories for us.
So actually, everything really starts with triathlon again. So Jim McLaren was a 300-pound offensive lineman for Yale in college. And in 1985, he was taking acting classes in New York, was on his motorcycle, gets hit by a bus, thrown 90 feet in the air, dead on arrival, loses his lower left leg, reinvents himself, and runs a 3:16 marathon with a walking leg. That's where I first heard about this guy.
3:16?
3:16. Then he comes to Kona and goes 10:42.
How big was he then by the time?
He's probably 190, but he was still 6'3", 6'4", big guy. Yeah. So he comes to Kona and goes 10:42 at the Ironman World Championship. And then that's when I did a feature on Jimmy, and he got Budweiser as a sponsor and Profile by Design. He's traveling the world. Every triathlon wants him. 8 years later, he's racing in Mission Viejo, Orange County Performing Arts Center, which I think you've done. And a van goes through a closed intersection during the race, hits the back of his bike, propels him headfirst in a pole. The guy's an amputee, becomes a quadriplegic. It's mind-boggling. The same person happening twice. Wow. So Jimmy, right away, it was, we got to do something. So Rick Kozlowski, who's actually here racing, he put on all the events in San Diego, a race director. Jeffrey Essikow, who worked for the Tinley Company, which had actually come up with a gel to use on his prosthetic leg for Jimmy, for his race kit. And so the three of us got together and it's like, we got to do something for Jimmy. So the idea was we're going to put on a little triathlon. And before Jimmy, I'd covered through the magazine a lot of wheelchair athletes. And one guy in particular, this guy, Jim Knob, who taught me a lot about disability. Jimmy was an Olympic trials pole vaulter. got hit. He's on his motorcycle going to a track workout. You did a different route to work that day, got hit by a car, paralyzed. He says, Bob, I knew before I hit the ground that there was a reason for this. And he became sort of the Pied Piper and, say, listen, I just did the same 10K you did. I won the race. Why don't I get the money? Right? And he's wearing a Dalmatian skin suit and the whole bit. First time I interviewed him, I'm at his house in Long Beach, and I see a nickel on the ground in his living room on the floor. And I'm like, oh my, poor crippled guy can't pick up the nickel. And so I go to pick up the nickel. It's glued to the ground. And Jim Knob's sitting there drinking a beer. He says, so Babbitt, you didn't think the poor cripple could pick up the nickel off the floor? He says, don't ever underestimate somebody with a challenge. We're still athletes. And he came up with a line. I got an MTV Sports thing with him and David Bailey, who was a former motocross guy, who was in a wheelchair as well. And he's like, the person who wins a race isn't the person who goes the fastest. It's the person who slows down the least. And, that is universal. Everybody can relate. You can relate to that, right? And a wheelchair guy can relate to that. Yeah. So Jimmy was the one who sort of showed me, and before CAF, I was putting on these wheelchair criteriums during these bike races in San Diego. They have at La Jolla Grand Prix, you have the women racing and the men racing, and in between, we do a 5K with Jim Knob and David Bailey and all these top wheelers doing a 5K with preems every lap and the whole bit. And what
year was this?
That was probably 85, 86, 87. This is
this is a long time ago. Yeah,
it was a while. Yeah. It was something about the stories. Yeah. You're a storyteller. Yeah. There's something about the stories when you're an Olympic trials pole vaulter, and then the whole thing. You're a construction guy, and all of a sudden you're in a wheelchair. Yeah. Where do you go? There's no internet back then. So Jimmy, they would be telling people in rehab center, hey, you need to get a van with lift and hand controls and all this stuff. And Jim Knob would drive up in a 1965 Rambler convertible and have his chair behind him and grab it out of there and throw it next to his car and dive into the chair. And he'd roll in and go, they told you what you can't do. I'm here to tell you what you can do. And that always stuck with me. So anyway, when Jimmy gets hurt the second time, what I heard from Jimmy was, when you get into from Jim Knob, when you get injured, all of a sudden you're 30 years old, you're paralyzed, and here come mom and dad back in your life. You were an independent person, and now you're not. There's something that's really awful with that. So our goal was, we're going to raise $25,000 by Jimmy a van with hand controls to give him independence. That was it. We raised 49 from the little triathlon. We're like, this is awesome. And 3 amputee women who were friends of Jimmy had put a relay team together to support Jimmy at the event. And they're like, thank you so much for what you did. Jimmy's a big hero to us, but did you know when you get injured, your health insurance covers a walking around leg or an everyday wheelchair? Nothing to do with sport is covered by insurance because they consider sport a luxury item. We both know sport isn't a luxury item. It keeps us sane.
It's life.
Keeps us from medication. It keeps us from so many things. So that's when we got our 501(c) and decided if someone needed a piece of equipment, training, or travel to stay in the game of life through sport, that CF would be there forever. So it's been 29 years. We've raised $147 million. Wow. We've sent out over 40,000 grants to athletes in 73 countries, all 50 states and Puerto Rico, and more importantly, 104 different sports. So if you are a sled hockey player, if you're a wheelchair basketball player, if you're a para-triathlete, you need equipment, you need training, you need coaching, you need travel. That's where we're like. Just in April, we sent out 3,256 grants totaling $6.2 million.
Wow. Where does the funding come from? How are you doing the fundraising?
We do the funding a lot of different ways. We started with that San Diego Triathlon Challenge, right, which we raise usually 1.2 million a year. Yeah. We do an amazing bike ride that you would love, 640-mile. It's called the $1 Million Challenge. We go from San Francisco to San Diego, close it off with 175 riders, 12,500 each, and we'll have 20 challenge athletes along with. So you police escort out of San Francisco. They meet you for lunch along the way. And each day when you're done with the ride, your masseuse is waiting for you. Your mechanic is there to tune up your bike, and your bags are in your 5-star hotel room.
Wow.
And
so
people
it's
have
done right. Yeah.
People have created business partnerships. You had the president of Qualcomm, the president of Gateway. People have created business relationships that have lasted a lifetime through that ride.
So what's it called again? What's that?
It's called the $1 Million Challenge.
The $1 Million Challenge. And can you look that up online?
Yeah, just on challengeathletes.org.
I know I've got enough crazy listeners that are wanting to do something like that. So
Ed Baker needs to come and do
Ed
that.
Baker,
He would
I'll
love
mention
it.
that to Ed.
He would love it.
Yeah,
So then actually next weekend we have a gala in New York out in the Hamptons. And the interesting story. So back in the day, I've called David Yates, who's the president of Ironman. When Jim McLaren was injured, I called David and said, David, can we get a spot in Kona to auction off to raise money for Jimmy? And he gave us 2 spots. And that's really where all the charity stuff with Ironman started. And this guy, Scott Stackman from New York, decided he wanted to do the Ironman. And so he bought a spot through us. But part of the deal was he had to come out to our San Diego Triathlon Challenge event. We started with Jim McLaren, and he needed to participate in that event to validate.
Yeah.
We wanted people to know the cause, not just buy a spot.
Yeah.
So he comes out to do the event, and he's standing there when this little boy named Jake Frank, who's a double above knee amputee, we are presenting him a set of running legs. He gets out of the wheelchair, pops the legs on, and starts running around. And he receives the legs from Robin Williams, right? And so he's playing tag with Robin Williams. And for whatever reason, Jake runs over and grabs Scott Stackman's hat. So Scott is chasing this little kid with these legs that he just received. And he's thinking to himself, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. If I do something in New York, people will support it to the max. So he calls up Virginia Tinley, our executive director, and goes, listen, I'd like to put on an event in New York. And she's thinking, oh, you want to put a luncheon? He goes, no, I've rented out the Waldorf, and we're going to do a gala. And we're like, what the hell's a gala? Well, 300 people, 700 people, 800 people. He's raised $22 million through that gala over the years. Wow. And this next weekend, the 13th of August, we'll be out in the Hamptons for the first time doing the gala out there.
Wow.
And yeah, but that started with him coming out and wanting to get a spot in Ironman, knowing nothing about who we are and what we do. And then Jake Frank and chasing Jake, and that changed.
That is awesome.
Is that amazing?
What are some of the biggest impacts that you've seen through the foundation on certain athletes? Has there been a couple that really stand out?
Absolutely. Well, one is Emmanuel Ofosu Yeboah from Ghana. Emmanuel was born missing his tibia in one leg in the country of Ghana. In the country of Ghana, 20% of the population is disabled through nutrition, through all sorts of different, there's malnutrition, there's cerebral palsy, there's 20% of the population of Ghana. And then your family is cursed if you have a child with any type of disability like that. So, and you see them, your lot in life is begging on the side of the road. So Emmanuel was born and missing the tibia, so he had a foot sticking out the back of his knee. His mother, Comfort, her name was Comfort, his mother was told to abandon him in the jungle because she would be a curse on the family. Dad had deserted the family as soon as he was born. So she refused to do that. She would carry him to school every day. And he's the only disabled kid in school. Emmanuel turns 13, mom gets sick. So he decides he has to leave school to shine shoes for a couple dollars a day to take care of the family. When he turns 18, mom passes away, and through a missionary, he sends us a typewritten grant request asking for a bicycle because he wants to ride across Ghana to show people that someone with a disability can do anything. So we get this typewritten grant request, and his birth date is Cinco de Mayo, which is my birthday. And we decide, we'll send him a bike. We'll never hear from the kid. He rides 600 kilometers across Ghana with one leg on a mountain bike. And we're receiving all this media about what this kid's doing. He's changing. Nobody with a disability had ever done anything like that. We bring him to San Diego to do our event that we started for Jim McLaren. He's never been out of Ghana. He's never been on a plane. He has $3 when he gets to San Diego. Does the 56-mile bike ride with one leg on a mountain bike in 7 hours, right? And I said, Emmanuel, what'd you think of the bike ride? He goes, Bob, I did not know San Diego was so hilly. So our title sponsor was Loma Linda Hospital. And I always tell people this story because it's like when people think, well, God, how do I change the world? I'm just one person. How do I change the world? So we reach out to Loma Linda and say, is this kid a candidate for a prosthetic? And they say he is. So we're like, okay, we'll take care of the cost of the leg, cost of transportation back and forth to Ghana. And they'll take care of the homestay and the operation. We send him back to Ghana, and I started thinking about it. If we don't capture this is a huge miss. So Lisa Lax produced all the Ironman TV shows for NBC. Her sister, Nancy, twin sister, identical twin, produced the Tour de France for CBS.
Wow.
Between them, they won 16 Emmy Awards. Lisa also produced, she was the one working for NBC for the Sydney Olympics, because she had been doing the Ironman for NBC, said, we are going to start the Olympics with the triathlon and use it as a travelogue to show the Sydney Opera House, to show the entire city of Sydney. So that we'll be able to do that with the triathlon because of my history with the Ironman. I know that's what they did. It was, you know what the crowds were for that woman. It was crazy. Keeley still says the loudest. So I call Lisa and Nancy, who had both just left television, to start documentary film company. I said, I don't know if this is a documentary or not, but here's this kid, Emmanuel. He's coming. He's going to get his prosthetic leg, and I'd like you to shoot him now, be there for the operation, and be there when he does our event with 2 legs rather than 1. They go, we'd love to do that. When's he coming? Like 5 months, 6 months? No, 5 days. They put a crew on a plane immediately at their own expense. They fly to Ghana. They are there for the operation. He has the operation. 6 weeks later, he does a triathlon.
Wow.
Yeah. 3-mile run, 10-mile bike, 150-yard swim in a pool with his brand new prosthetic leg. Flies back to Ghana, gets off the plane in Ghana. He's got jeans on. He'd never worn long pants in his life because he had his stump sticking out the back of his knee. Gets off the plane, and it's in town of Koforidua. Ticker tape parade through. He's got a $15,000 leg on in a country with a per capita income of $400. Comes back to our event the following year, does a bike ride with 2 legs rather than 1 and 4 hours rather than 7. And receives our Most Inspirational Athlete Award from Robin Williams. Then we fly him up to Nike, where he receives the Most Inspirational Athlete Award. It's called the Casey Martin Award. Comes with a $25,000 grant, which we match. So now he's our ambassador to Ghana. Then we send him to New York to have a sit-down with the Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, who's also from Ghana, to talk about the rights of the disabled in Ghana. Then we send a rough cut. Lisa and Nancy send a rough cut to Oprah, who agrees to narrate the film. And then Lisa and Nancy pitch ESPN on Jim McLaren and Emmanuel receiving the Arthur Ashe Courage Award at the ESPN ESPY Awards. So imagine this, we're sitting in the Kodak Theater in LA, and here comes Matthew Perry from Friends as the host of the evening, introduces Oprah, who comes out and introduces a 13-minute feature on Emmanuel, CAF, and Jim, narrated by Kiefer Sutherland, that is beautiful. The piece airs. There's LeBron James and every star in the world in tears for our little charity that we had started like 10 years earlier. It was like so then we go to, we get a call that President Bush had watched the ESPY Awards and would like to meet Emmanuel. So we go to the Oval Office. We're in the waiting room for the Oval Office. We're going to launch the film at the National Geographic Theater in D.C. that evening. So that morning we're at the at the White House. And we're watching the news, and there's these bombings in London, in the subways. And we're like, oh, there's no way President Bush is going to see us now. Well, they escort us into the Oval Office as as Rumsfeld and Cheney, Secretary of Defense, and the Vice President are sprinting out of the Oval Office. And so they usher us in, and it's myself, my partner John Smith from Competitor, it's Emmanuel, and the most powerful person on the planet, President Bush. And he's like, Emmanuel, what I appreciate is you were never looking for government help. You were looking to change the plight of the disabled on your own. So when you ride your mountain bike, do you use SPD pedals? Do you ride cages? Do you ride flat pedals? Because I ride with my boys at Quantico. We ride hard. How do you ride? So Emmanuel is wearing his Ghana garb, and he goes to take his leg off. And when he does that, it makes an audible click, which the Secret Service wasn't very happy about. Oh, they start moving towards us. And the next thing you see is the President of the United States holding this leg in his hand, right? Yeah. So the guy who set up the visit for us sends us a note the next day. Hey, guys, I want to let you know, it's great to have everybody here. We keep a list of the first things that happen in the Oval Office. The first person to take their leg off in the Oval Office, Emmanuel Ofosu Yeboah from Ghana. Oh. So the next day, Emmanuel is flying back to Ghana after we show the film. And the picture of him and the President of the United States is in the papers in Ghana. And the President of Ghana had done nothing to support Emmanuel in trying to get a Disability Act passed in Parliament. The President meets him at the airport in Accra and says, Emmanuel, I will get your Disability Act presented to Parliament. And 6 months later, it was passed.
Wow.
And then, flash ad 2010, we're with President Bush doing a mountain bike ride. It's called the Warrior 100 down in Texas, and it's a bunch of the folks who lost limbs in defense of our country. And myself and Jeffrey and some other folks from CAF. And the first night, we have President Bush is doing the shake hand thing, right? So I walk up and I said, President Bush, you probably don't remember, but we met a few years ago in the Oval Office. I was with a young man from Ghana. He goes, Emmanuel, I never did find out. Does he ride flat pedals? Does he ride cages?
Really?
Yeah.
He remembered the whole thing.
I said, President Bush, you don't realize the fact that you met with Emmanuel changed the plight of the disabled in Ghana. A Disability Act was now passed because of you. He goes, well, you give that young man my best. So Emmanuel now travels the world as a motivational speaker. His one daughter, Linda, named after Loma Linda Hospital, where he got his leg. His second daughter, Comfort, named after his mom. And his goal is to build a fitness center in Ghana where all the employees will be disabled.
Oh, Bob, what a fantastic story. And I didn't want to interrupt any of that because it really... Firstly, huge congrats on you and your team. It blows my mind that one letter
changed everything, and you see that all the time.
Yeah,
you see it all the time. It's the coolest thing.
Do you find? I mean, I don't want to keep too much of your time, but do you find it? Is it emotionally challenging for you, the role that you have? Is it like extremes? Because I guess you're dealing with people that have struggled, and you're trying to help them,
right?
And then you see them have new limbs and suddenly feel empowered. I mean, it's
the coolest thing because someone you relate to, Jamie Whitmore. Yeah. Jamie's 37 Xterra wins. Yeah. And won world championship. And she ended up having to have a tumor removed from her sciatic nerve. And they knew when they cut it, she'd have drop foot and would never be able to race again. She was at the top of her game. Yeah. And so I called Courtney, her husband, at the hospital. I said, Courtney, I know Jamie. She's going to need sport. So tell her to give me a call when she's out because, there's parasport. Yeah. And I know when Jamie was a little girl, she always wanted to be in the Olympics. But she was a runner. She wasn't a good enough runner. She wasn't a good enough swimmer. She wasn't a good enough mountain biker. But Xterra, she was great, but Xterra wasn't in the Olympics. So anyways, she gets out. We get her into paracycling. In 2016, she ends up taking a gold and silver in the Paralympics. And she's there. And actually, she went through... She had been, sick with the cancer and everything, and then she thought she was over it, and was like, I got sick again, and she went to the hospital and said, "What's going on? I thought I was through everything." Pregnant with twins.
Amazing, right?
So the twins were there in 2016 when she won a gold and a silver in her second athletic life, and she went to this last Paralympics in Tokyo. So to me, it's being able to come into somebody's life, and our team does this every day, at possibly their lowest moment, and it's being able to see trajectory and see going to the Paralympics, Lauren Parker and people like that. Lauren Parker, who was, she was a top Ironman hopeful. And she crashed on her bike and ended up being paralyzed from the waist down. Both tires went flat at the same time. April of 2017, I had her on the radio show in July. And she says, Bob, I need to stay in triathlon. I'm like, well, then you need to come to our San Diego Triathlon Challenge in October. So we flew. She checked herself out of rehab to come to San Diego Triathlon Challenge, and which you need to come to, by the way.
Yeah,
you need to come.
What time of year is that again?
It's October 21st, 22nd, 23rd.
Okay. Oh, great. Right after Kona.
After Kona. You should come. Yeah. So she comes out, and I think she was thinking, all these people are going to be there for me, and they're going to be thinking, gosh, poor Lauren, and how do I help her out? And we got 150 challenge athletes from all over the world there, right? And she comes to the Thursday night thing we do for the kids, and you've got kids who are missing all four limbs. You got kids who are in wheelchairs with huge smiles on their faces, and that's what hit Lauren. She's like, why are these kids so happy? They don't seem bummed about anything. And I think it changed everything for Lauren. Then we got her a hand cycle, got her a racing chair, and within a year of being paralyzed, she took a bronze at the Commonwealth Games. The key is you avoid that spiraling depression by finding a positive, finding a sport, finding a purpose. And for Lauren, it was, I'm a triathlete, I'm still a triathlete. And watching her finish in St. George, both the 70.3 and the full, that was pretty damn special.
That's awesome. Bob, if people want to get involved with CAF, whether it's funding or any other involvement, what's the best way to reach out?
Challengeathletes.org. It's the easiest thing you can see, and you can check out any of the video pieces on YouTube. We've starting with Lisa Lax and Nancy Stern doing video pieces back for us in the not long after Jimmy was hurt. We do a really nice job of storytelling. There's some really cool pieces.
So challengeathlete.org.
That's it.
People go check it out. Make sure you go support and get involved. But those stories, and I know we could go like hours and hours with your stories. I really do. But I just want to be, I know you're racing on the weekends. So
There's no such thing as racing. I call it a catered workout.
Yeah.
It's like you ride along, someone hands you something. And then if you're in a beer garden by 9:30 in the morning, that's a good day.
That's a good day. All right, before I let you go, I want to throw some, it's a new sort of thing I'm doing on the show. It's called opinions.
Okay, sure.
And hypotheticals, I guess.
Hypotheticals, okay.
All right, and it's a bit of fun. All right. Greatest triathlete of all time, male and female.
Oh, my God. Well,
there's no right answer. We can have a bit of fun.
I'm going to say from a female, it's McKeely Jones, just because the variety, the Ironman, the shorter distance, and the fact that I like the fact that she's still killing it.
And she just loves the sport for the longest time. And even her career was decades. Right?
And also, she was there at our first San Diego Triathlon Challenge in 1994 for CAF. And she has been exposed to all our athletes, and that led to her guiding Katie Kelly to a gold medal in the Paralympics.
Yes.
That to me is really, really special. And, obviously I'm biased. She's
I don't think there's a lot of bias there, mate. I've had, Craig Alexander and I, there's a few of us that we go, these days you start to throw in a few different, potentially Daniela and potentially Flora Duffy, and a few more recent, they are remarkable women, and it's fun to watch. But, McKeely, it's hard to go past MJ, that's for sure.
And from a guy, what's funny, when I was watching the, sub 7, sub 8, and I think that stuff is great. But if you look at what Mark Allen did and Dave Scott did in 89, and I know I'm the get off your grass guy, I still think you look at that and the bike, you talk about riding in a pace line, the whole bit, you're taking an hour off the time. But if Mark Allen and Dave are swimming 50 minutes and they're running 2:38, 2:39, that's not much different than what those guys are doing, 30 years later?
Yeah. But it's also with that 89, and I'm happy to talk about it all day, every day, because for me, it's like there's certain moments that transcend what the sport was about, right? And I don't even like to put in Mark and Dave to somewhat as the greatest of all time, because they're almost more like the godfathers of the sport. Do you know what I mean? Like we should remove them and say, look, they're up here, and they're above the greatest of athletes of all time, because we don't have, they're beyond that, because we don't have a sport without them in that context. I mean, we still probably do to some degree, but their impact and the races that they had and the story that goes with it, and that 89 moment, it really... It did. It transcended the sport beyond just time, beyond a race time.
What I was going to say, too, when you talk about Dave, you think about the first time he comes over, course record is 11:15, goes 9:23. 2 hours. And he took everything in terms of the first guy to run sub 3 hours in Kona, sub 250. Right? Yeah. The first person to go under, to go under 9.5, to go under 9, to go under 8:30. You need that person who's not racing tactically, who's just going for
pushing it.
Plus, people thought of Dave as, he's a great swimmer and he's a great cyclist, and he's vulnerable in the run. Then he became the best runner.
He's a gritty runner. I mean, when you watch you can throw the form.
Forget it.
The guy, like you said earlier, he's got the duck feet, and he made it happen. And there's a resiliency there and a pure grit that was just unbelievable with the way he could race.
When you saw him come back in 94, and it's funny because I have a poster that we did called The Equalizer from the 1990 race, and it's Tinley... it's Mark Allen, it's Rob Mackel and Wolfgang Dietrich, and you see the ribbon of Queen Highway behind them and the helicopter and the whole bit. It's very cool. And, Dave didn't race 90, 91, 92, 93. Like 4 years, he's out of the sport. And so I had that poster.
Comes back at 42? Was he 44 or 42?
Or he came back at 40.
40.
First time, and then he came back again at 42. You're right.
Yeah.
So he signed the poster like in front of those guys. Right. This is Dave. He's going to sign it in front of where the other guys are, in front of Mark Allen, those guys. But when he came back, and I remember when he rolled his bike in, he's got a 26-inch carbon frame. He still had his shifters down on the down tube, and everybody's like, oh, my God, what a dinosaur. Yeah. Next thing you know, he's leading the race, and he's 11, 12 seconds down on Welchie going to the energy lab. Yeah. And then the following, in 96, he did a different, and actually I did his sponsorship stuff for 94 when he came back. But when he came back in 96, he had a different bike, and he was set up wrong on it. And, Dave's not the best mechanically in the world. Yeah. And he had a really crappy bike ride. He's like 25th, 26th off the bike. And it's like the old man, he ran his way into 5th, ran 245.
I remember that.
So it's just, that type of stuff, just changing the perception. And I think Mark would tell you, in terms of pushing the limits of the sport, it was Dave.
Oh, it was Dave. It was Dave.
Yeah.
And there's a huge camaraderie and respect between the two of each
Yes.
other now, you know, and they still have their little bit of a chip. And I love that because it's so deep. It's so deep. There's still this little rivalry, especially more from Dave, I think.
Oh,
you know.
totally. Mark's over it. But it's funny. I remember one time I was at the grocery store on Pay and Save Hill, and I could see it happening. Mark was coming around with a cart, and Dave was there, like collided with the cart. And I'm like, why did I get that on camera? That's like the coolest thing.
Exactly
These guys are still bashing into each other.
Yeah. Okay, next opinion.
Yeah.
This year, 2022, we're back at Kona.
Yes.
Touch wood, please.
Yes, I know.
Okay, men, women, favorites. Who are you going to pick?
Well, you know what? I love Daniela Reef. I just think that a lot of people were counting her out, and I think she was. You know, it's funny because when I was interviewing her, I was like, you know, Daniela is adding up all this stuff, and it's like I think you've raced 40 times since whatever year it was, 2012, 13, and you've won 35. I mean, it was like
it's insane.
It's insane, right?
Insane.
And it was. I think she had a hard time getting motivated during the whole COVID time, and who doesn't?
Yeah.
I think that, you know, all the workouts that you're seeing online right now, I think that she is ready, and you know, why can't she go get 9?
And there was an adjustment period after leaving. You know, Brett Sutton was
Yep.
the coach, and then she said, "Okay, I'm going to go out on my own."
Exactly.
And there's that adjustment of having to learn how to do it yourself as well. And I think that race she performed in Utah was extraordinary.
Extraordinary. She was good. So I would pick Daniela.
Yeah.
And on the men's side, my obviously main concern is Jan and the Achilles. You know, as you get older, coming back from that stuff is
It's hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. If Jan's at the top of his game, having him and Gustav and Christian coming down a lead drive together would be pretty damn sweet. I would love to. The other, I mean, you can't ever look past Daniel Bakkegaard, Mark.
There's a list. There's a list. We're
Marcus,
not leaving names out without respect.
No. The thing is, there are legitimately 20 guys who think they're going to be.
I think it's going to be
first, second, third.
I think it's
Right.
going to. You know, I just had Magnus Ditlev on the show.
Yeah,
you know,
I love Magnus.
He's winning in Roth, and I tell you what, he's 24-year-old.
You're seeing so many of
the
these guys
intensity
young.
of him though. These guys are doing it with intention.
Right.
They're not turning up and going, I'll go for a bike ride with my mates.
No.
On a long ride. But no. They have physiologists. They have psychologists. They have exacting training. They're coming with intent, and it's a next level game that's coming along. And the Norwegians, as you mentioned, they're leading the way with all of that. But and Jan kind of took it a whole step, and it's kind of like it just keeps evolving. It's amazing.
Well, and what I love about guys getting in, my one concern is guys getting in doing full Ironman so young, and because we've seen the heart issues and all the rest of it. But if guys can pick and choose and stay away from too many Ironmans, I think it's great. Magnus, what impressed me when we were in Miami and we were in Daytona, he was never afraid of the moment. We both know a lot of guys and women who will come off the bike in 15th and run their way to 8th. And they do it year after year after year. And you're always thinking, next year will be their year. But they don't grasp the ring. They don't, when they have that opportunity to go for it on the bike, they don't do it. Alistair and I chatted about it once. It's like, Alistair, guys who are riding with you who know that you're going to kick their ass in the run, why are they not riding in front, trying to get away? He goes, it baffles me. I had no idea.
Well, in fairness to that, I have a side story. We're talking about Alistair Brownlee here, the greatest Olympic triathlete of all time with 2 gold medals. I remember I thought in 2011, you know what, maybe I'll give the Olympics another go.
Right.
So I went to Madrid, and then I did Kitzbühel. Madrid, I was terrible. I was really jet-lagged and screwed up. But anyway, went to Kitzbühel, and I'm coming off sort of winning all the non-drafting races in the US. So I'm pumping my chest as this uber, I know how to ride a bike.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I'm 39, so I'm probably getting a bit old, but I remember getting into this race in Kitzbühel, had a good swim, was out in the top sort of 10 to 15, and jumped on the bike, and it's draft legal, and I'm just punching the bike as hard as I could. And Alistair kept punching around me, like this. I'm like, what? This is a kid. Like, how come I can't get in front of this guy? And he was relentless, and he was abusing everybody. And I was
yelling
telling him,
at people, right?
And I'm like, oh, mate, settle down. Shut up. And I was abusing him back, kind of feeling like I'm the old guy.
Right.
And anyway, on the final lap, he managed to get away with 5 guys. Not only did he get away, he then had the fastest run by a minute.
Right.
So when I hear Alistair say, why aren't these guys taking turns with me? He's just better. It's like we're
they
trying.
Might be trying.
We're trying here. And I remember coming back to the hotel room, after that race in Kitzbühel, I said to Laura, never in a moment in my career did I ever feel that I couldn't beat somebody. You know, whether it be whoever I was racing.
Macca, whoever
it didn't matter. I mean, it didn't mean I got to beat them every time.
But you felt on the right day you
they
could
were
have
beatable. Hamish Carter, Simon Whitfield, Macca, Craig Alexander, my group of guys. It was like, and I came back to 12 and go, Javier Gomez and then Alistair Brownlee. I'm like, I can't beat them. Not at this game. I said, maybe in the non-drafting. Maybe in the non-drafting. Well, just the Olympic distance non-drafting was my thing. Maybe at that I think I've got a shot. But it was the first time I said it out loud too. Yeah. That like, I can't beat two people. And it was like, whoa. And so then I went back to the US and kept doing my non-drafting.
Exactly.
Anyway, but I just on that Alistair Brownlee, he's just so good.
You've seen in others as well where they know. Molino used to talk about it because the guys who he knew he could run better than, they would be intimidated to go by. He's a Terminator. They're not going to go by him on a bike. And he's like, they know they can't outrun me. So I'm happy to sit with those guys.
You play the game. You just play the game.
I sit right here. You know?
Well, mate, this has been absolutely fantastic. What do you got on for the rest of the year? What do you got coming up?
We've got, I'll go to, obviously, Kona. We're going to start early this year because of the women's race being on Thursday. So we'll start like the Wednesday before. We'll start 28th, 29th, 30th, and then the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and
how many people do you interview?
Well, we just did
Breakfast with Bob Kona edition's just the ultimate for people that can't make it. Tune in.
I think we did 58 last time, and we just did 44 at Edmonton, and that was really fun.
Wow.
That was my favorite was the Holly Lawrence. I was like, she says, Kona is just such a bucket list, and I need to do that sometime, but then you gotta qualify, and you gotta then you're dedicating your whole season to try to get to Kona. And I said, so I'm giving you a wild card right now to go do Kona. She goes, I'll take that. So I mean, that's the deal. Is she's great. I just love the attitude she brings. This is a great era for our athletes. Are all so special.
It's the
so
athletes,
professional.
the events, the opportunity to make a decent living from the sport. There's the professionalism. And what the PTO are trying to do.
Phenomenal.
There's just so many. It's a great time to be an athlete.
It really is. And as Charles has said, our athletes deserve all of it. All you guys who, you're up at 4 a.m, you're working all day. Yeah. It's a tough way to make a living because you're not a basketball player. You're not a baseball player. You don't have that big off season. And what PTO is doing, when you went to Edmonton and you got $5,000 for finishing 20th.
Yeah.
$5,000 and $2,000 for 20th to 40th.
Yeah.
So you're basically covered.
You're safe.
You're safe.
Yeah.
Right? And the years you'd come to the States, you're like, okay, if I don't get first, second, or third, I lose money here.
Yeah.
Right? There's something wrong with that.
No.
And PTO's changing that.
You start to get this point where you can have a lot more depth. So now you're not just looking at 1 to 3 guys. You potentially can, make a reasonable income even if you're a 10th and so now you're getting this stronger depth of races, which looks better for TV. And then it also affects it does filter down to the amateurs and the age group events because now we're getting more money into the sport. We can, rising tide lifts all boats. So it's a really great time to be a part of it. Are you heading over to Samarin?
I'm not going
this year.
Yeah, I'm not going to Samarin. There's just too much going on. I think we'll be our whole baseball tour with our guy.
So quickly, let's finish up with that. Okay. I know I've kept you a bit, but I just want to hear about that baseball tour. So what's going on?
Landis is a buddy of mine named Eric Cochran, amazing filmmaker. He shot for National Geographic, shoots Shark Week, Discovery Channel, all that stuff. Called me like 8 years ago. And he goes, hey, I'm at a veterans softball game in Orange County, and there's a kid here who's missing both hands and both legs, and he's batting his cross-wristed, and he's hitting the crap ball all over the place. Not only that, he's talking smack to the veterans. The kid's 7 years old, and guys, pitching to him. He's like, dude, you're missing a leg, not an arm. Get the ball over the plate. What's wrong with you? And he's going, I don't know where it's going, but I'm just going to keep shooting this kid. And so he's been shooting him from the age of 7 to the age of 16. And this movie became Landis Just Watch Me, which is now on Apple TV. It's on Google Play. It's on Amazon Prime. And he's thrown out the first pitch just this month at Yankee Stadium, Padres Stadium, Houston Astros, San Francisco Giants, and tomorrow is Philadelphia. And it just keeps going on and on. Good Morning America. He was on ESPN Top 10 the other day.
Wow.
Threw out the first pitch in San Francisco. And when we were in Yankee Stadium and he's doing, they set up for him to do batting practice, and he's hitting the ball out towards the warning track, right? No hands, no legs. And all the Yankees just were they couldn't believe it. And then all the media, it looked like a Michael Jordan media scrum with 30 cameras around him, and he's 16 years old. And, I would have been peeing myself. And he's sort of like, where you guys been? I've been doing this since I was, 2 years old. I'm a baseball player. This is what I do. Yeah. Just watch me. He's amazing. And the story is amazing. And
we'll go check
people
it
can
out.
watch it at landismovie.com. They can check that.
Landismovie.com.
Yeah.
All right, Bob. Well, mate, this has been absolutely a pleasure. It really has been fun. Thanks for sharing,
man. Thanks for taking time on your vacation, man.
Are you kidding me? No way. This was a real highlight. It's like I've spoken to you for probably 6 months or so to say, hey, I need you to get on your show, to be able to do it in person.
That's the best.
I just love this, to be able to chat in person and have this conversation. And so I really appreciate it, mate.
No
and those
problem.
Stories are just epic. They really are. This was one of my favorite episodes. I'm going to put it out there. This was a lot of fun, mate.
Yes.
Really cool.
Hopefully I didn't go on for too long, man. I can tell
that's
on
me, because I'm just like another one. So I appreciate you sitting with me this time. And for everybody listening, you can find all the show notes and timestamps and everything on bennettendurance.com/media. Bob, mate, this was fantastic. Cheers, buddy.
Have fun, Greggy. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for listening. If you enjoyed the show, your support would truly be appreciated. You can visit the Patreon page, or you can subscribe with your podcast app of choice. Don't miss the next episode, so subscribe and be notified. For show notes, if you want to know more, please visit bennettendurance.com. I'm Phil Liggett, and on behalf of Greg Bennett, here's to the next time, and I hope you will join Greg again very soon.